Hi everyone and welcome to This Is Why We Fight. I'm Jo.
And I'm Jordan.
Hello. How are you, Jordan?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you? Why are we asking each other this? We know what we're doing. we know how we are. We've already had this conversation. It's very strange.
This part is filler, obviously. I hope everyone in the chat is doing well. Hope you've had a fantastic Easter weekend. And, well, it's still ongoing, technically, for another couple of hours. And that you're all well and safe. We are talking tonight about tyranny again, because there's so much of it to cover. And
This is an interesting one though, because this isn't tyranny in a normal fashion. This is somebody else in the media pushing back.
yes, a rarity.
There is one line in this article which, if nothing else, it just makes everything else perfect.
It's
The
just
the
wonderful.
quality of the one-liner is so good.
So, yes, ladies and gents, we may have found a unicorn. Let's have a look and see if you agree.
I'm not sure I'll go that far. We don't know what the rest of his catalogue is like.
Well, maybe on this one issue. Are we ready?
Indeed, let's go.
Okay, let's have a look. So, this is a Telegraph. So, we've been looking at the Guardian as well. A Telegraph article by one Tim Stanley, who is pretty annoyed, actually, by COVID passports. So let's have a look and see what Tim has to say, shall we? I'll take the first paragraph, Jordan, and then we'll discuss. Haven't looked at this properly. We thought we'd do this one blind with you guys in the chat and see what you think.
After bigging it up, I hope it's good. Because I've only read the first paragraph and one line of the second.
Well, for mainstream media to call the government to account, their actual job, I'm really quite excited. So let's crack on and see what Tim Stanley has to say. So he begins with this. The COVID passport is a revolting idea, authoritarian, discriminatory, un-British. The PM will give us more details in a press conference today, but it's a mark of how far lockdown has warped our values, that it's already being hailed as a freedom pass. Oh, so much to discuss already. The public is all for it, of course. Not all of the public, Tim Stanley. These are the people who call the cops when they see a queue outside a church. We've become so used to control that being permitted to do something that in ordinary times would be quite normal, like go to the theatre or attend a football match, is treated as a benign act of mercy by an all-loving state. Ho-ho! This man is not happy.
He pulled no punches there.
No, exactly. Freedom pass. This is a very insidious language that they use. A freedom pass. You cannot have freedom without this. So being locked down is now the default. That's the norm. And freedom is a luxury that you will be grateful to receive from your evil overlords. Instead of freedom being the default and this awful lockdown-itarianism is some kind of alien ideology that we've all been forced to undertake. It's really quite amazing how they've switched things around and how quickly in the space of just 12 months, I suppose it's technically 12 months now, isn't it, since lockdown, give or take a few weeks. How quickly perceptions have changed, where lockdown is now the norm for many people. And freedom...
It's not only the norm, but it's wanted.
Yes.
People are somewhat upset about other people going on holiday, which I can't work out at all.
I think in the grand scheme of things, people worrying about their foreign holidays, given everything that some people have lost, does, I suppose, smack a little bit of selfishness, but... You don't know. It's very easy to sit here and judge other people, isn't it? When you don't know what they've been through, what they've lost this year. They may need this holiday. They may be grieving. They may have lost someone. I mean, literally lost someone, buried someone. And we just don't know. We're not in a position really to judge anyone. Because
beyond that, it's not anybody's job to dictate to other people whether or not they can or cannot go on holiday. It's just absolutely ridiculous.
I think making it a priority above other things is the thing I meant by selfishness. I don't...
No, I know what you mean. I personally wouldn't go on holiday even if I had the money, I wouldn't be doing it because, we're facing something far more serious than whether or not you're going to have your week off in Costa del Sol.
Yeah, I
We've
agree.
got a problem, lads.
And not to make this all about economics, we collectively do not care about GDP, but there are companies and holiday operators in Britain who really are more deserving of our money right now. If you're going to spend money, they call it a staycation.
I hate that word so much.
I hate it.
It's so, I don't know, staycation. It's yuppie.
It is.
That's what it makes me feel like.
It's like a trendy word. It's really, the Great British Holiday is something to look at in awe. Honestly,
I'm not sure anyone has ever described going to Clacton as something that should be looked at with awe.
Yeah, but they should, because I think people just look at the surface. Oh well, it's a day to Clacton, or it's a week in Clacton, or it's a fortnight in Clacton. It doesn't sound very, superb, does it, Clacton? But it's what you do on holiday. It's the point of the holiday. It's a tradition. When my family used to go on holidays to places like Clacton, and we used to rent chalets or whatever was available, static caravans, whatever. It was so much more than just a location. All of the people that we met while we were there were just like us, and it was like a community within itself. You made friends really easily. I actually made such good friends one year. This one girl, I think I must have been about 15 or 16, she found a lump in her breast and she went to hospital. We became such good friends. I went to visit her in hospital for the last 4 days of my stay. It turned out to be a cyst, thankfully, and it was nothing serious. That's how close we became so quickly. Because these were our people. These were the same kind of people doing the same kind of things. We came together and we had a good time, and it was, I don't know, it's a tradition. I think one that needs really to be held much higher in our estimation. But even so, the home holiday is a special thing, and I think we've lost sight of that over the years. And granted, English weather is not it's not to be relied upon.
I don't know what you mean. It was snowing today. It's wonderful.
I don't know if it snowed here. I missed it. I was busy, but English weather is not something you can rely on. I keep saying I must find this video. I think it was a Boots video or something, or a sun cream video, where it showed the sun coming out in England and everyone just racing down to the beach. It was like
that was a Boots advert. Was
it Boots? Yeah.
Yeah.
Like a Benny Hill thing, but without the music. Everyone just racing to the beach.
That's only from a few years ago.
It is a couple of years old. It's so funny though.
Anyway, we've gotten desperately off the point.
Yes, we have. So the point is, staycation sucks. But the idea behind it, staying at home, having your holidays in your own country, there is so much to see in your own country that most people just don't consider. We have tourists that come to Britain that know more about, Buckingham Palace or the London Eye or wherever they go than most of the locals do, because you take for granted, I think, the things that are on your doorstep. Mm-hmm. I would love to see more of us taking more of an interest in our traditions and our historical buildings and various things like that. Anyway, back to the story. Sorry about that. A little digress there. I'll let you take the next paragraph.
But we're still discussing the first one, aren't we?
Oh, okay. We can do. The Freedom Pass.
This is just the first time I've seen a real strong pushback in any sort of mainstream paper. I don't know about you.
The real question is, why has Tim Stanley been allowed to print this? Because it certainly goes against the narrative, doesn't it?
There is that aspect, yes. You always have to. I think the reason he's been allowed to publish it is because of what he goes on to say later on.
Oh, well, let's find out what he says then, and then we can discuss the whole thing.
He goes on to say, the lesser gods of Westminster, which is a cracking line, will say that COVID certification can help us open up sooner. But the rumour is that technology won't be operational until September, by when the vast majority of us will be immunised anyway. So what's the point? This is one of those things. He's still pushing the immunisation line.
Well, I suppose, baby steps.
You can't have everything.
Exactly.
He's pushing back on one thing. That's good enough for me. The rest of it, maybe not. But that one aspect, fair play. They'll say it will be temporary. They said that with the first lockdown, and just like they said that with ID cards, need only worry if you've got something to hide. That was a weirdly written sentence.
Yes.
Okay, good. That did actually break my brain. So they say COVID passports will only inconvenience people who refuse to get a shot. So his default is that people will take the vaccine.
There are lots of reasons for people to refuse, though, and how dare anyone else judge you for refusing?
Yeah, which is what he's doing.
Ah, Tim, you started off so well.
I know. I told you. I've only read the first line and the first paragraph and the first line of this paragraph.
I do agree with not with his take, but this assumption that people always say this. Oh, there's going to be increased security and lack of privacy. Well, what do you have to worry about? If you've nothing to hide, you've nothing to fear. Mm. I hate that so much. It's not that people are engaging in criminal behaviour and they're worried about someone catching them. It's that people are engaging in private behaviour and they're worried about someone spying on them. It's a massive difference. And is this not impacting private information and private behaviour?
There is another aspect of this. I've just kind of thought, this thought is still formulating, so it might not come out totally clearly, but...
It's brewing.
It kind of is brewing. One of the other issues with the surveillance state is that if the police are able to watch your every move, they're able to say you've done something or you've been somewhere, and you don't have any way to prove them wrong.
Well,
because these are the people who are watching you constantly. They're the ones who actually hold the records. They can change the records at will.
Yeah, and you can't prove a false negative, and all they have to do, as we know now, all they have to do is accuse. Mm-hmm. This is the kind of witch huntery of this whole exercise, isn't it? Going back to race-based laws, as we've discovered looking into that. And as everyone probably knows by now, for you to be accused of a hate crime, you must only trigger someone's perception that one has actually happened. There's no due diligence anymore. There's no investigation. So Jordan could say something to me and I could say that I perceived it to be something, and that would be sufficient to prosecute him, or at least to arrest him and investigate him, which is completely unfair, because I could have mental health problems. I could be schizophrenic. I could shut up. I could be holding a grudge. He could be my ex and I want revenge. I mean, there's loads of reasons why people may make these things up. And by taking someone's word for anything without proper investigation and actual evidence is the path to hell. It really is. It's a downward spiral, because anyone holding a grudge or anyone with an agenda can literally accuse anyone else of anything. And this is not dissimilar from what they're doing here, because what they're saying is, we have the right to watch everything you do. And it's just like with DNA, when a certain group of individuals have access to all of the DNA of the citizenry, and somebody becomes, I'm going to use this term loosely, an enemy of the state, what is to stop them planting that DNA at a crime scene and then claiming that you committed that crime? And I wouldn't dream of accusing the police or the government of being that corrupt, because that would never happen. But what I'm saying is that people in power tend to abuse that power. And when no one is holding them to account, certainly they could abuse it. And when there's no accountability to provide evidence for anything they do, or evidence for the things that you are accused of, where does it end? Who's monitoring them? these people who monitor us?
They monitor themselves, and this is one of the big issues.
So if I if I owned a company and I did something really bad, and I said, but don't worry everyone, because I'm going to hold an investigation into my own company. That's essentially what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Like I wouldn't be biased at all. Like I wouldn't already know the outcome before I undertake the investigation.
But you're being incredibly silly. What you would do is set up a separate company, call it independent, fund it, and then put your employees in it, and then say, there you go, that's an independent investigation.
And I'm going to get the outcome I want, of course. So the police investigating the police, or the government investigating the government, is essentially someone investigating themselves and finding out that they're innocent. Mm-hmm. I'm innocent because I investigated myself and I've deemed myself innocent.
We haven't covered it at all, but that seems to be what's happening at the moment with Cameron. I haven't followed it very much at all. I know you all, but certainly haven't either. But seemingly he is being investigated for corruption because of his dealings with one of the hedge fund managers. I don't know who it was, but anyway, one of the big boys in the city was offering his services as a advisor to the Treasury for free while he was PM.
Oh, really? Double tap.
Pretty much, but there seems to be something going on there, and it's much what you're saying now.
I tell you what's interesting, and I wish I'd bothered to screenshot this earlier. I was flicking through some news earlier. The government was accused of something, and I can't remember what it was. I wish to God I had it right now, because it's really relevant to this. And this member of parliament said, I don't recognise that statement. Like, okay, you've been accused of something, or you've been accused of saying or doing something, and you're saying you don't recognise it. What? So it didn't happen then? I'm expecting a lot of I don't recognise to come out of the government. It's like a magic bullet, isn't it?
That's better than I can neither confirm nor deny.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't recognise it. It has nothing to do with me.
But Boris has said a few controversial things over the years. All he's going to say is, I don't recognise that. That was my comment. And that's the end of it.
He definitely didn't call anybody letterboxes.
No, exactly.
At all.
That was... I read that, and honestly, my jaw dropped to the floor. I was like, wow. That's literally the end of that avenue of investigation. I don't recognise that, therefore it didn't happen. Move on.
It's pretty spectacular.
That's wonderful. It's actually genius. Anyway, let's carry on with this article.
Getting back to this, you keep dragging us off topic.
Sorry, that was worth it though. I don't recognise.
Look, the entire conversation was worth it. I find it really interesting. Just before we read this paragraph, about 20 minutes ago now, you said it's interesting why this person, Tim, has been allowed to write this article. Well, and then nestled within the second paragraph, there's all the defaults there nudging nudging the public into actions they want.
Yeah, so Tim is like 1% freedom fighter. And then by paragraph 2, he's back to 99% conformity.
Exactly. It's interesting. And once again, now we've got the Mindscape thing out of the way. This is what it's so bloody useful for. This is why we spend so much time doing it.
Yes.
It's to understand what they do and what they say. And when they say things like messengers, well, here you go. Here's somebody who writes for a national newspaper, pushing the narrative that the vast majority of people will be immunised anyway. So what's the point? It's just a default assumption. I can't even... This point doesn't even bear writing. Well, I can't be bothered. That's what it's basically saying.
Well, Tim's playing like good cop, bad cop with this article, isn't he? Or rather, good sheep, bad sheep. Let's read paragraph 3.
Good sheep, slightly rabid sheep.
Here we go. Let's see what he says. But if the tech is up and running before September, there'll be loads of people who won't have had a jab or a recent history of infection. And I wouldn't blame them if they're reluctant to take a test now, because they've been known to give the wrong result. Wow. Okay.
See, if you say this to some people, they're going to say you're a conspiracy theorist.
Exactly. Okay. He says if the outcome is positive, that's life ruined for the next few weeks, weddings cancelled, jobs lost. The young, who have already put their careers and private lives on hold, will suffer the most. I want to challenge that. While the elderly can go and see Phantom on Ice. What? Plus, we know that some groups are less likely to be tested or jabbed than others. Why?
The Phantom on Ice reference is because the elderly have already had the vaccine.
Well, not all of them.
And no, well, you know.
And I'm really sick of this this implied young people have suffered more than anyone else. Comparisons aside, arguably everyone's suffering in their own way. I'm really tired of this. This smacks of the Brexit talk, where the old people have ruined the opportunities for young people. Oh.
But it's interesting because it is mainly, I'm not going to say entirely, but I would say it is mainly going to be the Ramonas who are pro-government tyranny.
Well, they must be, because they were pro-EU tyranny. They were pro-EU controlling our sovereign state. Well, sovereign state. Yeah. I was pro-Brexit, make no bones about it, but let's be honest. We haven't secured sovereignty or agency of our own country, have we? Brexit was a ruse, I think, to test the waters for conformity, in my personal opinion now, thinking about everything that's happened since. It's interesting, though, isn't it, that the EU are now faring worse than they did, even during the Brexit referendum. And I think this was a case of making people loyal to the state versus the EU, so that when this was rolled out, that loyalty would be paid back or used or taken advantage of. Can anyone say that we have sovereignty or agency at this point in time?
No, we just have a tyrannical, oppressive government. That's it.
But that government doesn't work for us, does it? It may not work for the EU, but it certainly doesn't work for us.
Do you know what this... Sorry, I've just had this thought. Sorry to interrupt. The system we're currently living under, whereby we have to ask permission from the government in order to go anywhere, and we have to get paperwork in order to leave our own local area, it's the feudal system. Once upon a time, serfs had to ask their feudal overlords permission to do pretty much anything outside of their own village. Inside the village, it was fine. They could obey the laws and all was good. But in order even to get married to somebody in a different village, they had to get permission. It's exactly what's going on now. They're replacing this system, or the previous system, with this weird feudal monstrosity.
Well, feudalism, of course we fully embrace that. No, of course we don't. Look, here's my new motto. I don't know why I couldn't say that. Embrace community, receive freedom. Simple as that. Right, anyway, let's move on.
Anyway, carry on, please do.
So, the young, whatever. Everyone who has put their careers and private lives on hold will suffer the most. Plus, we know that some groups are less likely to be tested or jabbed than others because they live beyond the reach of the state or they don't trust it. Some groups. Okay. Just imagine what would happen at some Islamic or Pentecostal event when half the audience show up without a passport and have to be turned away. This is nonsense.
There's a lot to unpack here.
This man is making an example of one or two small communities and ignoring the larger problem, which is that most people, whether they accept and embrace this tyranny, they all know deep down at a fundamental level it is wrong and it's illegitimate. He's making this about one or two communities. This is about all communities everywhere.
But there is one very specific phrase in this. Did you see it? Because they live beyond the reach of the state or they don't trust it.
Well, living beyond the reach of the state...
saying that if you don't... Basically saying if you don't trust the state, you're an outsider, you're an outcast, you're the oddball. You should trust the state. Otherwise, you're as good as these people who live beyond the reach of it.
Well, that's tying you in with basically what, the Islamics or what, travellers?
Pretty much.
I would argue that many people don't trust the state. It's really important that people understand when we talk about. And I just want to clarify: I'm not an anti-vaxxer. That is, I've never been prior to this. I'm not willing to be tested with this untested jab, experimented on at the state's leisure. But this is not about that at all. What this is about is the government have lied. They lie. That's what they do. They spy and they lie and they cheat and they manipulate, and we know this for a fact. I don't really care who's delivering the jab, because I don't trust what's in the jab, because the people who lie to us are telling us it's a good thing to do.
And then they're getting their lackeys like this geezer to push us along the path.
Exactly. If the government was selling lollipops, I would say no, because guess what? I don't trust them. If I don't trust you, I'm not going to trust anything you're peddling.
And this, once again, they did state this in the Mindspace document. They recognised this as a problem. They recognised that having the government tell people to do stuff isn't going to work.
Which
they
is
need
why
messengers.
Yeah.
Which is why this phrase that he said here, they don't trust it, is so important.
Why don't people trust the state?
That should be the question. To me, not trusting the state should be the default position. You have absolutely no reason whatsoever to trust the state. First off, the state should never be doing anything where you require trust in it. The only thing you should trust the state for is basically enforcing contract law, enforcing actual criminal law, and then protecting the borders. Beyond that, it shouldn't have anything to do with anything. It's not its domain. It's not its business to be dealing with such things.
It's the state's job to keep the country running, and it's the state's job of various departments to keep you safe.
But define... So, see, what you've said is too broad. It's not the government's responsibility to keep you safe. It is its responsibility to protect the border and nothing else. Right. It isn't its duty to protect you from health and safety. It as sure as hell isn't its duty to protect you from something like this.
I said via its various departments, and I'm not talking about a virus, I'm not talking about a vaccine, I'm talking about the police. The police are charged...
I'm not sure even that's their responsibility.
The police are charged with a duty to prosecute crime, to investigate crime, and to lock up criminals. I know that the police have got a bit of a dilemma on their hands, as most of the criminals are now in or around number 10. But they are now prosecuting and treating like criminals law-abiding citizens who are just reasonably requesting that they have the right to freedom, to privacy, to go about their business in a lawful manner, because these people are not asking to be allowed to riot. These people are saying that they have the right to run their business, to earn a living. When has that never been, or rather, when has that ever been something you need permission to do?
But in what you said, when you said that it is the government's responsibility and their various agencies or departments to keep us safe.
Safe from foreign threats, yes.
Right, but the word that you used was safe. You didn't then go on to clarify.
Right, well, I'm clarifying now. Safe from foreign threats.
Right,
well,
this is one of the problems, because when people do this, they get lazy with words. They say keep us safe, or keep people safe, whatever the terminology people want to use. It then leaves the door open to nut jobs like this, who then say, there's a virus going around, we need to be kept safe from it. Government, please do something.
Oh, the government can't keep you safe from a virus.
Or anything in particular, but it always comes down to this. The government's first thing is always, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. The second you look to the government for help is the second you've got a problem in society.
I'm from the government and I'm here to help myself. Should be the end of that sentence.
Government cannot fundamentally help you. All government does, or the only thing government can do, is...
hinder you. Create paperwork where none is necessary.
No, the only thing government can do is enforce compliance. That's it. You don't want to live in a society where there is enforced compliance. You want to live in a society where people go along with the norm. People agree, the culture agrees that something is this way for a reason, and it's good for people, and people just carry on doing it.
But which culture?
You don't want the government constantly getting in the way, constantly telling you that you have to change your behaviour, and if you don't, you're going to go to prison. This is one of those prime examples.
Which culture, though? Because the government have imposed this new culture on us. The culture, that certainly the culture of England, is that everyone has personal liberty and freedom.
Yes, this current culture that they're trying to implement on us is just a globalist monstrosity.
Is Big Brother on steroids, right?
Yeah, it's nothing to do with any culture on Earth.
Well, no, of course it's not, because it never existed before. They've created this.
Exactly, it's completely unnatural to all people.
I want to know about this live beyond the reach of the state. What does he mean by that? Does he mean Muslims because they have their own community imams who make their own rules? Who is he talking about there? But live beyond the reach of the state.
I don't know. That's an interesting...
Beyond the reach of the state would imply... Go on, sorry.
Criminality. That's what that implies to me. If you live beyond the reach of the state, you're a criminal, you're an outlaw.
But beyond the reach of the state implies the state cannot help you. Outside of, what, national borders? What are they talking about here? Or what is he talking about?
No, beyond the reach of the state, to me, implies purely that you are a criminal.
So he's aligning those who refuse to be tested or jabbed with outlaws, as you said.
Yes.
People who have ignored... People who've ignored all the brainwashing. You dirty outlaws. You've ignored all the brainwashing. You're not doing as you're told. So you live beyond the reach of the state. Beyond the reach of the state for how long is the question. Isn't it? I mean, people still have the freedom at this current time, at the time we are recording, to refuse to be tested or jabbed. Again, this use of the word jabbed, I don't like it. It implies that they all know that this vaccine is not a vaccine because it doesn't meet the criteria of a vaccine. It doesn't protect you from catching or spreading.
It certainly implies that they want it every year, just like the flu jab. That's what it implies to me.
Chris Whitlis has implied that. Chris Whitlis has come up with a few choice phrases. The first one being, pretend you have it, which is amazing. And the second one being, treat it like the flu. Well, we can't treat it like the flu because it eradicated the flu. What is he talking about?
But we can't treat it like the bloody flu, because if we do treat it like the bloody flu, we're thrown in prison. We're not allowed to go outside. We have to stay in our own little homes.
If we treat it like the flu, then the country reopens, everyone goes about their business, and some people take some cough medicine and maybe a pack of tissues in their bag. I mean, I'd love to treat it like the flu.
NHS.
I have been treating it like the flu.
I would love to know whose brainwave it was who ticked off that one day when they came out with the phrase "protect the NHS." Oh, sorry, not protect the NHS. You interrupted my train of thought. Were you? Well, the phrase "act like you have it," because that is an unbelievably dangerous thing to tell people. Especially when you know clinically proven trials have shown that there are, psychosomatic things. What's the word, Jack?
Psychosomatic.
Somatic, thank you, not schematic. Anyway, there are things that you can think about, and you'll make it better or worse, depending on if you believe it or not. So telling the entire population that you have it, or to pretend that you have it, incredibly dangerous and reckless.
Well, is that like teaching little girls to pretend they're little boys? And if you reinforce it often enough, fantasy becomes reality.
To an extent, kind of. Not really.
I mean, not reality, but in your mind, fantasy becomes a reality. If you act like you have it, you are more inclined, you not, to go like full Dot Cotton and look at every possible symptom. I do believe that illnesses like viruses, colds, are mind over matter. I know this from first-hand experience. I'm not claiming this as a scientist. I don't have any scientific background, but I know that when I feel a bit rough, if I give in to it, if I lay in bed and say, oh, I'm so unwell, I feel worse. But if I get up and I get dressed and I go to work or I do whatever I was going to do anyway, I tend to feel better. Which is mind over matter, right? Mm-hmm. You either give in to it and you embrace it and you let it wash over you, or you say, yeah, I'm feeling a bit rough, but I'm going to carry on with my day, and you tend to just kind of power through. If you are going to go through life thinking, convincing yourself that you have something you don't have, eventually, the stress of that will actually cause your immune system to suffer, and anxiety and stress will contribute to various other factors, and you will start to become ill. Because nobody can live in that heightened sense of stress all the time. We talked about this way back when we talked about leaving children at nursery. This consistent heightened sense of stress is too much for any person to take. So act like you have it is actually a green light to say, mess with your own head. Convince yourself of unreality.
Stress yourself out. Yeah. Overthink for us.
Well, yes. If you can convince yourself that you have something you don't have, we no longer have to waste any time convincing you. That's really, really genius when you think about it. Because we're not having to do any of the work now. You're doing it for us. Like people who self-censor or people who embrace the tyranny, embrace the gilded cage. Now you have slaves willingly enslaving themselves. It's genuinely Machiavellian, but it's genius. It's genius. Your evil overlords can take a day off because you're doing their work for them, right? Mm-hmm. Anyway, back to the article. And over to you. I'll let you do the next paragraph.
Thank you very much. This next paragraph kind of relatively relevant, I suppose. It will be Windrush all over again. I mean it. At the heart of the Windrush scandal, where Commonwealth citizens who had lived here for decades were threatened with deportation, was outrageous. Un-British proposition that a citizen should have to prove their Britishness. Hitherto, it was largely accepted in this country that the state leaves you alone unless you're doing something wrong, which is a phrase I'm going to come back to in a moment. With Windrush, individuals were assumed to be up to no good unless they could prove otherwise. The lockdown has pushed this hideous notion to its logical conclusion. To the extent that we have been prevented from doing things that are probably of no harm, like sitting on a park bench, and now, if these horrid passports are introduced, we'll even have to prove we're in good health.
Okay, there's a lot to unpack there. Do you want to start?
Oh, yes, I do. Hitherto, it was largely accepted in this country that the state leaves you alone unless you're doing something wrong. Really? How's taxes working? You know, how's the legislation going? Does anybody remember during Brexit they were complaining, oh, we can't possibly have Brexit because it's going to take far too long to go through all the legislation? You know, this is just examples of them interfering in our lives. They don't leave us alone at all. They're constantly there. They're constantly poking and prodding. We have to walk a pretty narrow line to the extent that even if you decide you're going to quit your job and start working for yourself, you have to tell them. You basically have to ask permission from them. Excuse me, sir, am I allowed to work for myself? Oh, yes. Yes, good sir, if you are indeed allowed to work for yourself, just give us some money.
I'm thinking of something a bit closer to home, actually. Something we covered on, I think, Police and the Police podcast.
Oh, yes.
Which is simply this. The law has always served us in the following manner. You can do anything you want unless it is illegal. who deems it illegal, of course, are politicians.
Mm-hmm.
Who enforces that are the police.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, that's how it's always been. Unless something is specifically labelled illegal, you are free to do it without government or police interference.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're using words like unlawful, which means basically, if you boil it down, now it's turned around that if we have not specifically given you permission to do something, you can't do it. And it's switched. It's flipped. Before it was you can do anything unless it's deemed illegal. Now it's you can't do anything unless it's deemed lawful. I don't like that. When he talks about it was largely accepted that in this country the state leaves you alone unless you're doing something wrong, that is how it's always been.
Mm-hmm.
Now the state does not leave you alone because you now have to prove that you're doing nothing wrong. And as he mentions, sitting on a park bench. You now have to prove that you are entitled to sit on a park bench.
You have to get permission for these things.
And you'll either encounter a police officer, or a COVID marshal, or whoever has been designated overwatch on that particular area. You now have to justify your entitlement to be outside, and you have to justify your right to be somewhere. This is guilty until proven innocent. This is an immediate and terrible tyranny that we've never faced before, or certainly not in modern times. You have to prove that you have the right to do something. Or rather, you have to prove that you're not doing anything wrong.
The thing I take issue with most of all is the fact that they're not even putting it into actual legislation.
No, this is...
They're allowing private companies to do things for them.
Yes.
So it's like, oh, do you really want to go to, I don't know, the FA Cup final? Well, if you do, you have to take this little vaccine swab up your nose.
On that particular note, I will say, private companies, like everyone else, will abuse power if it's offered to them. I would rather that we boycott all of these things rather than accept that there are conditions inherent in attending any of these events.
Absolutely.
I'd rather say to these companies, if you're going to go along with this tyranny, we are going to boycott you, your venue and your company. And even if it means going without for a further 3 months, I guarantee you, if everybody did this, this would all stop.
Absolutely.
It just would stop.
Unfortunately, and this definitely is an issue, when it comes to things like venues, there will always be enough people in the local area who are...
willing.
Yeah, willing. I was going to say something else, but willing makes sense.
Or eager.
There'll always be enough people in the local area who are willing to go along to these things, especially at the moment where people have been kept inside for so long.
We've said this before when we've talked about starving the beast.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have the voice that we'd like. We do not have the platforms that we need. We don't have the influence that is necessary to change public opinion at this time. What we do have, though, is the power to withhold our money and to use our feet. If you want to teach these people that we do not bow to tyranny, do not go to these venues. If you are an avid football fan, just skip it. Just once. Just once. I would argue if you're a football fan, you're fairly loyal to your tribe, to your team. Loyalty to other people right now is more important than getting your own personal needs fulfilled. Because if you go to these events and you concede that these people have the right to demand of you access to your private medical information, you are setting the rest of us up to be forced to go through this every time. If you can withstand just one miss and boycott these events, the people running these events and hosting these events cannot afford to take the financial hit. Just one. Just one. And I guarantee all this COVID nonsense will pass. COVID passport nonsense will pass. These people are in business to make money. And if we start to say to them, if you are going to demand to see access, to have access to my private medical information, I'm going to withhold my money. I'm going to boycott your event, and I'm never going to attend another one until this nonsense is passed. They will stop. They will stop, because the government is not floating their bank accounts. It's not floating their business. The government is going to do what they can using private companies, but the companies will not be bailed out by the government. The companies will take the financial hit, and it will make them think twice about ever doing this again. This is about principle and ethics over personal pleasure. Just one, just miss one, and things will change. But we all have to do this, all of us, each and every one of us, because if they still make their money, they don't know that everyone is boycotting them. They probably don't know that anyone is. But if everyone did, it would really frighten them. It would make them think that this is a precedent that will continue and continue and continue. These people need to make money.
Just going slightly off subject, I'm just going through the comments. Most of them are on our side. They're kind of interesting. There's one comment, though, by someone, and I'm just going to read one line about it. If you don't like the vaccine, don't take it, just don't come anywhere near me. There is this unbelievable arrogance from these people, and I don't know a way to combat it at all. I would love people to put their ideas in the comment section. Ramona's had the exact same attitude. They're the default. They are the ones who, regardless of what happens, will be allowed to carry on as if nothing has happened, and you're going to be the one who suffers. How do we get these people to see that it's going to be the other way around? That if the rubber hits the road, they're going to be the ones missing out, not us.
You're right, this is about establishing defaults. We
And
need to establish that the default is that all of this is wrong. The default was before this, and this can never be the default.
This is the damn problem. It was the exact same thing with Brexit. This is why talking to Ramona's was so frustrating. Because these people just assumed that their way was the only possible way. No other way could possibly work. And any change to that is a change to the current default system, and it's going to fail. It's going to fall apart. It's the exact same attitudes we're seeing out of these maniacs now.
It's rather an interesting dichotomy that the Remainers were propping up the status quo, and yet they're the progressives.
Yeah, that is true, actually.
Because the status quo was to carry on as normal, right? Nothing to see here. Carry on letting the EU make our laws and decide, what we do and what our legislation is, and how straight our bananas are and all that nonsense. These were the people propping that up, and what we were saying was basically, we don't have an issue with Europe or Europeans. That distinction got blurred so massively that frustrated me. But that the EU was an unelected bureaucracy that was dictating the laws in our country, and that these people did not live or work in our country, they weren't of our country, and that they had no right to dictate laws that we had to obey, because they hadn't earned the right to basically have authority over us. I know that the British government palmed a lot of our problems on the EU, and I do accept that. Like things like the border issue, there's proof enough that the British government do not enforce our borders and choose not to. Because we've been out of the EU for a year now. We've never been part of Schengen. And we still have ostensibly open borders for anyone who can access a dinghy. Come on in. The door is open. But yeah, it was upholding the status quo, and I find that amazing. These so-called progressives. Oh, a multicultural future. And it's amazing that no one ever picked up on the fact that we don't want to be replaced by anyone, and that we wanted free movement to end with every other nation, because we knew that criminals come in all shapes and sizes, and we felt sensibly that nobody gets to walk through our borders without criminal checks. Of course, that's still happening, but now the government can't blame the EU. Now we all know the government is responsible for it. So there were a number of things. So the fishing rights was another. But these people were pro the status quo, and now they are pro the new normal. And there's just no consistency with them. No consistency. I've always been pro our traditions and us having agency over our laws and our legislation and our social norms, which is pretty consistent. But these people, my goodness. Anyway, let's read on. The government seems determined to give David Icke fresh material for his next book. What next? A barcode on your head? You joke, Tim.
Give them time.
But
hey, we already know they're barcoding children.
Of course they are.
We came across that. They were running those trials in Liverpool last year.
Yes.
We covered that.
Yes, and only with massive public outrage did that stop. Or rather, did that publicly stop? It may still be going on because the government are liars. I've always been willing to accept lockdown as a temporary suspension of rights for a greater good. So much to unpick with that. I don't want to risk passing this illness on to a vulnerable person. But the very point of vaccinations, or so we were repeatedly told, was that they would allow us to regain our rights as fast as possible. They said that about test and trace. That's another story. Instead, they are now being used as cover, even justification for the introduction of a whole new architecture of mass surveillance. And I'm sick of it. I'm sick of masks, of spying, of lectures, and sick to the back teeth of false promises and false starts. Last week, Chris Whitlas told us that in the future, COVID would be managed like flu, which I take to mean a disease that we avoid and resist but ultimately live with. Who?
There's a lot to unpick in the next one as well, and it kind of rolls on.
Okay, so let's just go on with this to start with.
Well, I think it's actually important to get a couple of things from the next paragraph as well.
Okay, well, you read that and then we'll cover it all.
Specifically, he says, I'd rather see big events cancelled than stuff like this be considered quotidian. I'd rather individuals were invited to judge risks for themselves rather than ordain the government as guarantor of health and safety. For goodness sakes, we're making real progress. We're immunising at a rate of knots for those under 40 are willing to wait patiently for our turn, because the prize, as far as I'm concerned, is that we'll finally be left alone. What a blessing it will be. I have no desire to have the state police my health for the rest of my life.
Oh, you poor naive fool, Tim.
This is what Joe said, almost instantly. We got through the first paragraph. You said, why is this man allowed to write this stuff? That's why. Because he's actually on board with it. He's just attacking them for a very small thing. He doesn't have an issue with the government overreach. He simply has an issue with a permanent passport for health. That's his issue. The lockdowns, don't care. The COVID jabs, don't care. No, don't care.
Arguably, he has an issue with prolonged overreach.
To go around with me for the rest of my life. That's this man's issue.
It's prolonged overreach. He's happy for it on a temporary basis. But like taxes, it's never temporary.
Mm-hmm. Notice that wasn't brought up in his example earlier on, because he did give an example of the
temporary lockdowns. Yes.
Yeah, there you go. Temporary lockdowns. They said it would be temporary. They said that with the first lockdown. He didn't then list off the infinite number of things that were temporary.
Well, let's pick this apart then. I've always been willing to accept lockdown as temporary suspension of rights for a greater good. Never, ever.
Nope.
Give up your rights for anything, because you will never get them back.
Exactly. You will never... The government isn't in the business of giving us rights. First things first, if it's a right, the government can't give it to us. They can simply take it away. By extension, they're never going to give it back.
Well, technically, if it's a right, they can't take it away either, which proves that these are privileges and not rights. As we've discussed before.
As privileges.
Yeah, but as we said before, because we've never had things like freedom of speech written down, because it's always been established and accepted that we have this. We've never had any threat to it before, so it's never been put in writing in any kind of contract between the state and the people.
It's always been a right to go and sit on a park bench.
Right.
Now, when was this ever written down? When was it ever needed to be written down?
That's the point.
No society in all of human history have we had to write down that it is our right to leave our front door and go sit on a park bench.
So think about the other things that you consider to be rights right now that aren't a legal binding contract between the state and the people. Because we have always accepted that things are as they are, like the freedom of speech, freedom of association, these are rights that we've always accepted, but they're not written anywhere. And because they're not written anywhere, this was a spit and a handshake agreement. The problem is, if the agreement's made with someone untrustworthy, it's only as good as the person you've agreed it with. And because governments constantly change, the civil service, of course, never does. At some point, this government, has decided that these rights are no longer applicable. And because we haven't insisted on something in writing, they can rescind those rights or privileges as and when they see fit. We trusted them with our fundamental liberties, and they are taking them from us one at a time because we assumed that the people we were dealing with were as ethical as we were, and they're not, and this is proof. If any more were needed. How many rights have they infringed upon since March of last year? I can't even remember the last time I was able to go out shopping and not see at least a sign saying, please don't forget to wear your mask before you enter the store. And that's the polite ones, giving you a choice. And we've said this before, the masks are a constant reminder that COVID is the real threat. Without the masks and without the news, life could have gone back to normal pretty quickly for the majority. And I've said this before, if the government hadn't enforced all of these stupid rules on us, people, I think, would have done the sensible thing and isolated their elderly, their vulnerable. When did they stop trusting us with things? When did that happen? Can you remember? Was there a date? Was there a year?
Did they ever trust us?
I think to some degree in the past we were trusted to get on with things.
Not sure about that.
We've never had a lockdown before outside of wartime. We've never had curfews before outside of wartime.
Mm-hmm.
Suddenly we can't be trusted to do the right thing. Is this the infantilization of society? Are we seeing this play out now in reality? I don't know. All I know is that absolute power corrupts absolutely. There's a reason why that phrase is a classic. And this, Tim, you start off so well, Tim. I'm now fully fed up with you.
Look, to be fair, I'll always be grateful for the wonderful line, the lesser gods of Westminster.
Yes, but Tim's only got an issue with them because the kind of tyranny they're enforcing is going to last longer than he'd like.
That's true, but we can nab that one line from him and carry on our merry way as if he doesn't exist.
Maybe. I don't know. I still think you're a cuck, Tim. I think you think that giving up your rights for some magic potion, some magic cure, is nonsense. The people generally who take your rights are just never going to give them back.
That's exactly what he said when he said that he was fine with the lockdown. Yeah, I've always been willing to accept the lockdown as a temporary suspension of rights for the greater good, basically. I'm willing to sell everything important in order to be safe right now because I'm scared.
Temporary.
That's what he's saying.
A year.
Once again, people who are scared, lock yourselves away. Don't demand that everybody gets locked away.
Yes.
Yeah, that's just quite abhorrent behaviour.
If the tiny minority of you...
everybody else is imprisoned because you're scared is insane.
Yes, imprison yourself and let the rest of us carry on. And when you feel safe enough to return to real life, we will embrace you.
Look at it this way. If we're wrong and we all go out into the world, we all get some magical disease and we all die, house prices are going to fall. You're going to be able to buy as much land as you want. You're going to be rich. All you need to do is just, let us go about our day. Let us kill ourselves off. It's fine. It's called evolution. The same thing happened after the Black Death.
well, this is going to be another Black Death, isn't it, if it carries on? Because so many people are struggling with lockdown. Lockdown is certainly taking more lives than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, we'd love to hear your comments on this particular story. We'd love to hear your opinions. And as Jordan said, if you have any other solutions, please feel free to share them.
Yeah, pop in the comments.
As always, it's...
Goodbye from me, goodbye from her.
Yeah, there's no end to the tyranny, I'm afraid. There'll be more and more of this. We'll keep covering it.
I really genuinely thought this article was going to be different because of the way it started. It was such a fine debate. He did wonderfully.
Yes. Well, he's got to appear to be on the side of freedom to get you to read.
Indeed.
Look,
it worked.
And then he drops the nudges. So there you go. Jordan got nudged. It's official. Anyway, thank you, everyone. We will see you for the live stream tomorrow at 7:30. And take care.
Indeed.
Bye for now.